Hello world, here I am. It's really late at night. You can see it's actually 10 to 4 in the morning. This is because not long ago I got back from seeing my mum and my auntie in Cambridge. My auntie lives in Cambridge, um, and I've never really been there before, so I had a little wander around, a little walkie, and um, took my 7D Mark II with me, and just thought I'd have a little go at doing some street photography in Cambridge. It's not always easy when one's mum and auntie are there because they're wanting to sort of talk about mum and auntie things like, are you wearing a balaclava in bed or whatever. But here we go. This is, I took loads of photographs. I just sort of, you know, uh, absented myself. Now I'm making a set of photos here to go to black and white. Okay, I'm in Lightroom. What I have done already is marked with a 4 or a 5 star any pictures that I think are any good. Okay, I've made a smart collection, okay, by including when I imported them, I put some keywords in, and one of the keywords that went on all of them was Cambridge. And so then that keyword, then anything Cambridge, anything 4 or 5 star went into a smart collection. Okay, so these are the ones I've got now, and there are about 70 odd pictures there. And I'm going to make a set of black and whites from there. Now, the thing about raw files is that that's exactly what it is. You know, it's raw corn. Or in my non-vegetarian days, when I went to Austria, I was there with my partner at the time. This was a long time ago. We'd just ordered a beer, but we saw some chap in this bar thing who'd ordered a bacon sandwich, thinking that it was a bacon sandwich, and what he got was raw bacon, and he wasn't going to eat it, and he was saying that's just like eating a pig. That's, you know, a live pig kind of thing, and the chef was refusing to cook it. Okay, that is raw in terms of a raw file here. Okay, this is what your camera sees, okay, before it does anything to it and converts it to a JPEG. Okay, if you shoot JPEGs, your camera will decide on all the settings for you, okay, and it won't be as easy to bring back any detail that's lost in shadows or any detail that's lost in highlights, and the colors or the color effect changes won't be as dramatic. Okay, so I would encourage anybody to shoot in RAW. Okay, I'm not Jared Polin. Frauenhaus photo, I shoot raw. You're like, oh, I'm a man. Ooh, I shoot raw. But yeah, it does make a difference. Okay, all right. So here is a photograph that I've got here. You can see this busker here. Okay, I'm sure he didn't know who these two guys were, but these two guys wanted to dance, and basically he's playing la 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 on his accordion there, and these two guys are having a wee dance. Okay, so first of all, the first thing I'm going to look at in terms of editing is the crop. I'm going to just check that any detail that I've got or any sort of main part of the scene is on that rule of thirds. Now, again, you see Leica, they I just watched Kai Wong. Kai Wong used to be on Digital Rev TV, but he and Lok Chen have left Digital Rev TV, which is a bit of a shame. Really, it's a shame for Digital Rev TV because I just, you know, I haven't found anything decent since then. Analog Rev TV, which is like the same thing, it's different, but yeah. Okay, so yeah, Kai Wong went to a Leica convention where they've just released the Leica M10, which is 6,000 odd euros, which no one can afford. But I noticed on his video that he made that, like I say, you know, rule of thirds, there are no rules. Okay, so it's basically what you like. But I do know that if there is a dud thing, like maybe the back of this shop window or something on a third, then it's going to be, it's going to take your attention away from the scene that's going on in front of me. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is click on this crop and just check that. You see, look, we've got a third here that's just on his coat, a third here that's just on his coat, a third here that's just touching this gentleman's accordion, and a third here on this bloke's cigarette. Okay, which is a bit rubbish really. Okay, so now look, this crop here is original, which means it's sort of the original aspect ratio of the photograph. So I really don't want to do too much to it, but here I go. I'm just about, so now the crop, the third, is on this gentleman's neck. We are, oh snooks, we are focusing on him dancing. Okay, I can bring it in a little bit more. It's quite fiddly trying to get this right. Okay, but we do want this accordionist, so we want his accordion there to be on a third. Okay, and now this, we are sort of tracing this gentleman's jacket down. It's not quite looking at just his sort of faux leather jacket there. Okay, I'm sure that's not really an animal. Okay, we can actually see this chap's accordion keys. So when I press enter here, the first thing that your eye wants to look at really is this chap's hand and where his keys are. Okay, but having said that, this chap here, big bloke here on the right, he's the one that is most in focus. Okay, all right, the accordionist is kind of out of focus, but it doesn't really matter. It looks pretty cool. The next thing we want to do is just check our white balance. Now, I always in Lightroom use the temperature thing. Okay, I'm going to come over to this chap's grey trousers. Basically, you want to find anything that should be white or should be black or should be grey. Okay, and when you've got like this person's hat here that should be white, and you've got this person's clothing here that should be black, and then you just want to find a grey, and that would be the best thing. If I go to black here, go to the black, that's made it too warm. Okay, so I'm going to press Command Z and undo that. Okay, if I go to white here, so you have to click the squeezer thing again. Okay, clicking on there hasn't really done very much, to be honest, so Command Z and undo. Okay, and if I click on his trousers, so what's going on here? Click on his trousers, it will have the right amount of change. And you can see that just cooled the colour temperature down just a little bit so that it flatters their skin tones a little bit. So once we're satisfied with the white balance, the next thing that we want to be looking at here is the exposure. Now, I'm quite happy with the exposure of that picture. It doesn't look overexposed, it doesn't look underexposed, so it doesn't look too light, doesn't look too dark. If your picture looks too dark and you bring it up, you've got to be ever so careful and just make sure that you don't introduce more noise into the picture. Now, my ISO there, I can barely see because I'm not wearing my glasses, but that looks like 6400 to me. That's pretty high in terms of noise reduction. Thankfully, the Canon 7D Mark II is not a particularly noisy camera in terms of the fact that I'll kind of show you. If I go to 1:1 here, that's the photograph's actual size, and you can see it, like even in this chap's jacket here, it's not very grainy, and that's because I had a wide aperture here of 3.5. I had a high-ish shutter speed. of a hundredth of a second, and that kind of has frozen the action just enough. Next, what I want to do is look at the contrast. Okay, now if you look at all of these sliders, you'll see that there's various sort of degrees of grey and black, and all I want to do now, I've got an Apple Magic trackpad, okay, but you could sort of do the same thing on your laptops, whatever they are, Dell or whatever. Okay, I'm just pressing down and just rolling my finger and lifting it off. Okay, and that has brought my contrast up just enough. It's brought it just where it's touching the blacks. Okay, and you can already see that picture is now starting to have some oomph and pop to it. Okay, and don't forget this is going to be black and white, but I subscribe to the notion that in order for your picture to look good in black and white, it's got to look good in colour first. Next, we're going to look at the highlights. Now, without fail, whatever kind of picture I'm doing, I always bring these highlights down to 0. Okay, here you can see that, like in this window here and everything, that the spotlights are really high. Okay, and yet, like on this gentleman here, he's red here, and there's there's too much light on this chap's cheek here. Okay, I'm just going to bring those highlights right down to 0. And you can see that the picture is already starting to jump out at you. Okay, yes, this chap here is just a wee smidge dull. Okay, but that doesn't matter. It'll change in a minute. Okay, now looking at my contrast, which at the moment is 24, which is probably enough to bring up the contrast in any picture. Okay, because the idea of me doing this video is to show you that this technique that I'm using here in Lightroom will work on more or less any picture, regardless even of whether you want to turn it to black and white. Okay, so the highlights are down, the shadows are going up just about similar amount to the contrast. Okay, now a picture needs a reference white spot. Yes, the white balance has helped us with that, but in order for us now, now that we've got sort of more or less the correct white balance that we like, or that I like anyway, what we want to do now is just give the camera a white spot and a black spot. Okay, now this white slider will work here. It's absolutely fine. You can drag it up and down. Okay, however, and I think this really only works with the whites and black sliders, if you hold down the Alt or Option key and then drag the slider, you'll see that it's giving you like an inverted image. Okay, and as I drag up here, I can see the image starting to show through. Now that means that it's going to blow some of the highlights. In other words, it's going to reduce the detail that you see in anything vaguely light. So what we want to do is, again, I'm just rolling my finger ever so gently whilst holding this Alt key down. My finger's always on the Alt key. Okay, just until there's nothing there, and you'll see that that has now, when I let go, it's just increased those whites by 15 whatevers. I don't know what measurements they're particularly using here. Okay, and I'm going to do the same on the blacks. Hold down Alt and drag this slider. Okay, but this time, what I want to do is drag it down until there's enough of my subject, which here is, yeah, the accordion is. If I move it up there, okay, that's going to look grey and washed out. If I move it down this way, just until there's enough of my original scene in there, and then let go, and boom, you see that is now jumping out at you. Okay, now there is this clarity thing here. Okay, under the heading colours, you've got the white balance and the tone controls here. Okay, the presence show it is kind of, how much sort of oomph do you want that to have? Okay, now I have a rule of thumb, and that is, if you're like me and you're getting on a bit, and when you smile you're covered in wrinkles, you want to reduce that clarity ever so slightly. Okay, and again, it's that rolling finger technique on your trackpad. Okay, just ever so gently. Okay, because no picture wants huge amounts of adjustments to it, because all you're going to do is bring out all the imperfections, all the noise and stuff in your picture. Okay, so again here, because these two here are kind of, you know, they don't look like they're covered in wrinkles. Okay, look, if I increase the clarity too much on them, you can see that's like 100, and it's not very flattering to them. Okay, if I decrease the clarity, it makes them look like they've come from the film Alien or something like that. Okay, so now look, here's another hint for you. If you double click the word next to the slider, it will always take it back to 0. See, double click and it takes it back to 0 where it already was. Okay, so I'm going to now move this clarity up just the tiniest smidge. Okay, and again it's just moving it into that slightly darker grey but not quite black area. Okay, the same as we did with the contrast, and the same as we did with the shadows. Okay, all right, I always leave the vibrance and saturation alone, unless there is some reason, like I'm looking at someone and their skin's too orange or their skin's too red, that I might start fiddling around with it. The same as with these hue and saturation things. Okay, you can just get bogged down in it, and it can just be too much, so I just tend to leave them alone. Okay, now because my ISO was so high here, if I put these pictures on Flickr or something like that, some geek is going to come back to me and say, why aren't they in focus? Why are they blurred? Why are they too noisy? Whatever. And you will get a geek that says that. When I get a noise reduction on these APS-C size sensors, particularly you know, sort of 20 megapixels and above, 16 megapixels and above, even for, you know, an APS-C size sensor, when my ISO is in the thousands, I tend to reduce the noise and increase the sharpening. It's just what I do. Okay, there is a magic formula. This will just work magic on your pictures. Okay, increase the sharpening to roughly 70. Okay, 69 matron, that's fine. Okay, that's what he said. Okay, luminance noise. Okay, this is the noise reduction. That is going to come to about 40. Okay, there we go, that's exactly 40. Okay, Lightroom is incredibly slow. Okay, so you might see it sort of drawing the screen a bit, but you can just see it smoothed out the skin. It's just brought out the image just the tiniest wee bit more. Moving on down, going into lens corrections here. Again, I always do this regardless of, okay, click remove chromatic aberration. Okay, chromatic aberration means, and again this is something that, you know, geeks will spot but probably you or I won't spot. Okay, it's when you get things, particularly in the corners. Let's just take that off and see whether or not we can zoom in enough to, oh, stop fiddle faffling. Let's go to, no. Let's move it here a bit and then go into the corners. You can see how noisy that picture is, even with the noise reduction on. Okay, that is 8 times its normal size, the image's normal size. But if we go up here, can you see maybe on his cigarette, can you see there's some purple there and there's some purple there? And reducing chromatic aberration should make that sort of thing disappear. Let's see if it does. Okay, and you know, here, you know, it's just almost too geeky for words, but do it anyway. Okay, only clicking a button there, and it's slightly, ever so slightly, particularly at this end of the cigarette, it's just reduced the purple around the edge. You've still got some up here, okay? And that might be also to do with the lights of the shop windows and that sort of thing. Yes, you know, this bloke now looks like has a skin infection of biblical proportions, but you know, this is because we are zoomed in so closely, okay? And that if you were to take this image at its original size, which if you printed it out would be huge, something like in the region of A1 or A0 even, then you can see how. Let's just bring it back. Okay, that's its normal size. That's full size, 1:1. Okay, you notice that if you look here, you can hardly see any purple at all. Okay, but particularly looking around white areas, if you see slight distortions of colour around the edges, then you know that that's chromatic aberration. Okay, I tend to not worry about it unless it's sort of jolly obvious. But the thing is, tick a box, it's nothing. Okay, enabling profile correction here again. Lightroom has a sort of bank of lenses. Okay, this knows that I used the Canon 17-55 lens here. Okay, and it will just sort it out so that it alters the perspective slightly. Again, if I take that off, put it on again, it's just altered your perspective slightly just to make up for any distortions in the lens. Transform you would use if you have things like buildings or whatever that weren't quite straight, but I think this looks pretty natural to the eye. The next thing down is effects. Okay, and it's saying style highlight priority. I always leave that. If you drag this to the left, you see the corners darkening slightly. That can act to give it punch, okay? But I would make sure that none of your subject was in the extreme edges of the frame, because that will darken it too much, okay? All right, and again, I'm just rolling my finger around, okay? And darkening it very slightly at the corners brings your attention to the subjects in the middle, okay? If I do it too much, you'll see that, okay? All right, if I drag it too much to the right, oh gosh, I've put devil's horns on him. But again, you'll see what it's doing to the corners, okay? So what am I going to do? Double click this word amount here, that puts it back to normal, and I'm just going to darken it by the roll of a finger, a gentle roll of a finger, and that now brings our attention onto the scene here and what we want to see. This dehaze, I suppose, you know how sometimes you get pictures and they look like, they look as if it was almost foggy on the day. You can use that to increase the clarity and everything. I don't really think I need it in this picture. If I drag it down, again, you can see, look, it's just, made it look like you're in the middle of fog. If I bring it up, it's perhaps just a bit too full on. So if you want to use it, again, I would just keep it so that you're just not quite into the blacks, but you're, in just into the greys. And that is us done, okay? In terms of, that's a good colour picture, okay? Even his skin now is not too red, okay? Yes, this is not chromatic aberration around here. This is what would normally happen if you had a red light shining on someone, okay? So that's a brilliant colour picture, and now I just want to see what that looks like in black and white, okay? Looking at my histogram up here, I can see there's a heck of a lot of black here, but this is because it's dark, okay? This is really dark by now. It's a winter night, and you're going on for 6 o'clock here. I might bring the shadows up just the tiniest wee smidge more, okay? Because there's nothing to say that you can't, okay? But it's just giving us a slight bit more dynamic range. Exposure, you can bring up, and you can see now that the whites are coming up there, but that's just too full on. Okay, I tend to find that more than about half a stop at a pinch, one stop tends to bring up the noise too much for me. Okay, but that's got just a tad more dynamic range there. Half a stop of exposure compensation is nothing. Okay, but that's our picture. Now, if I just hit black and white here, and it turns it to black and white, and now suddenly it's great. These two guys dancing around to the accordion player. I thank you very much. Okay, I will leave it there. How do I stop this darn thing? Click.